And how's the hackathon going so far? I really hope you enjoy the hackathons, and let's get started with some performance component for the last day of the hackathon, shall we? Okay, so first and foremost, a little bit about myself. I'm Shavin, and I'm a senior software engineer in Microsoft. I'm also a co-maintainer of Storefront UI, which is the component library framework for e-commerce, which are our main features in this talk today. I'm also founder of Vue.js Israel community, and I'm a book author and a blogger. I like to blog and write stuff about front-end development and anything interesting me. I'm also a Nux ambassador, a mega developer expert, and a Google developer expert. And a lot of people ask me where I'm originally from, so I need to put it inside. I'm from Vietnam originally, and I've been living in Israel for almost a decade. Yep. And you can always follow me or reach out to me on Twitter or GitHub at Maya Shavin, or my website, mayashavin.com. So let's talk about component library. When we talk about component library, you probably would think of Buildify, Bootstrap, Vuetify, Element UI, and a lot of popular component library that people are using. But what exactly is component library? So the very core function, the very core features of component library is component. For this, it has to be reusable, which means that you have a sidebar. It has to be reusable enough so the sidebar can be opened from the left side with the menu inside dynamic content, or be opened from the right side with the cart content inside. And it has to be stylable. For example, we have a toast notification. It can be styled with different color to indicate different state of the notifications. And beside the styling, you still need to provide customizable, because again, component library is there for user to use, and user only want to customize according to the look and feel of the brand. For example, add to cart, user may not like the icon info. They want to have some art icon, or even they want to change the close button to a real close text. Responsive. Well, nowadays, all the applications have to support responsiveness, which means the applications, the web applications have to look good in both desktop and also in tablet or mobile or anything other than these three. And it has to be isolated enough and testable, which means one of the main advantages of component library is that someone else tests and the test was covered during the development of component library, and you as the user would just take the component fully trusted that it's already tested and can be used without a lot of bugs and without him cracking his head over writing tests over it. So for this, I like to divide into two different main criteria of component in a component library. The first one is visual consistency. What it means is the palette, what is the main theme of the component library provide is called the UI. The second one is functional consistency, which means what users see straightforward, understand how it works, and work as is expected. Say a sidebar, have an overlay, have a button to close. You click on overlay, it closes the sidebar. Click on the close, it's also close the sidebar. Nothing unexpected, nothing surprising. For example, you click on close and you have a dialogue or something. That's not supposed to do. Or a card. For product card, where you can click on an icon with the similar card icon, and it will add the product into your cart. And this we call as the UX size of a component. So in general, component library is not about just a bunch of code snippets. It's part of a bigger pictures, which is the design system, where you talk about pattern, talking about style guide, talking about documentation, and so on and so forth. So, in short, building a good component library means you're building a good design system. And that's the talk. Enjoy. No, I'm just joking. We still have, this is just the beginning. Let's talk about How users select a component library? Well, user is you, developer. It's also me, developer. We always choose a component library based on several criteria. First, it has to meet the goal that we have in mind. Performance, customizability, simplicity, ease of use, how easy to use the component library in general. So let's talk about how do we meet as the goal as the component library development team. Well, the short answer is that no, you can't, because you don't know what users are looking for. You don't know exactly what's in user mind. They can looking for a component that is generic. They can looking for a component that is have a lot of transition, animation, and so on and so forth. What you can do is, instead of trying to meet the user goal, you need to define what you want the component library to achieve. And planning on top of that, provide a style guide design on the component design based on the planning on the spec, implementation, and keep revisiting to make sure that the implementation is done well and and it's practical for the user to use. So it's avoid all this mess about designer thinking one way and developer thinking the other way. In general, good planning will help to reduce the amount of breaking changes. Well, breaking changes is unavoidable. Even for the best framework library, will still have some breaking changes, but the less frequent the breaking changes, the better the component library under user eyes. So how in Storefront UI we define the goals? Well, first of all, is the component library for every need, like for everyone's need, or the component have a lot of component, like component library have a lot of component, generic component like Bootstrap, or it have to be supported. It supports only desktop and then on mobile later. No, we decide that it has to be focused on e-commerce solely because that's what we want. We want to focus on e-commerce, to build e-commerce website. Component have to be specific on e-commerce, and because of the nature of the industry, we prioritize customization so that the brand will be able to customize according to their look and feel. And our code base, because we prioritize the customization, we only plan for the code to compatible 80% of the design cases. And lastly, important, mobile first. Why? Well, think about it. Do you ever do online shopping nowadays with the laptop, or you just lying on your sofa and do it over your phone? Right? Let's talk about performance. Is the faster loading is everything about performance? The answer is no. Performance is more than just about the faster loading initial time. Just the same thing with accessibility would not be just about Lighthouse score. I saw a lot of websites that got 100% in the Lighthouse score, still not accessible. Performance, in my view, have two different parts, development and delivery. Development is all about how you define the implementation, how you structure the code, how you define the props, and all of this affect how the developer will implement, the speed of implementation, and the performance of the components, because you have dependency, say virtual scrolling library, like animation library, like Lodash, and so on. All of this will decide whether you be able to have a simpler structure, easy to maintain. The next developer come on board, they will be able to pick up this development and continue from there, so that we will have a faster delivery, because faster development, faster delivery, user can have the new version and bug fixes much faster. And that also including on bundling speed. If you write the component correctly, you also say in bundling speed, consume size, and installing effort, and so on. All of them very, very related to each other. Customizability. Are you ready for developers, other fellow developers as your user to try to break it? Well, No one likes other people code, so other developer probably wants to customize as much as they can because they think that's supposed to do. So how do we customizability? How do we enable customizability? Well, customizability is about two things. First thing about color palette, about baiting, bigger, smaller, and generic things, or even about size, which we have a setup size of icon, which common used. But then someone say, okay, I don't want this setup icon. I want something much bigger. So this is something need to customize, right? This is called style guide customizability, where you can customize color theme, typography, padding, margin, size, and anything. And then the next one is, let's say, the setup icon. User want to be able to customize, like use their own icon, something like Facebook, GitHub, and Twitter, something not common for e-commerce. Well, for that, we have to enable the customizability for component-based, which include icon, content design, and anything that out of the scope related to functionality. For style guide, first question, do we use CSS class to customize? Well, no, don't use it because then you deal with a lot of things like explicitity and which one low first, one low last, on the CSS ruling, and end up with a lot of important. SCSS variable is better, but again, because it requires compiling into a real CSS file, so sometimes you get into this problem, which will kind of make you feel very bad. So the best solution is using CSS variable. We're using CSS variable by defining the set of palette of style guides that we using across the component library. And then when user want to change it, he just need to make class a scope, class in the component, and provide the value he wants for the specific variable, and everything will change accordingly. How do we customize the inside content? Well, let's say I have a button. This is how we implement the asset button. And the user say, okay, I want to add an icon. Okay, fine. We're going to add an icon, and of course, an icon position left or right. And then you say, I don't want to have just this size. I want to be a bigger, want to be able to control the size of the icon. Then we have another problem. But this is not the end. What if the user want to have an on-click on the icon? What if? Endless props, it doesn't mean you can cover all the cases. What better is that you provide the basic default implementations and allow users to override the contents with their own implementation. Like in this case, the user will write with an icon and a text and the buttons to render correctly. And this is how we implement the asset button. We're using slot. So with the normal implementation, we cover most of the case, 80%. And with slot take care of 20% left, and we cover everything. How do we customize icon? Well, we have a set of icon. This is how the asset button with icon from Storefront UI icon libraries look like. But user want to say, okay, I want to use a cloud icon, which is not in the list. So what we do a research about it is that the icon is an SVG, will be only have one single color because it's an icon. You're not supposed to have more than one single color. For the sake of it, for the minimal form, because more than one color will cause confusion in user visual, and it's hard to concentrate and it's hard to understand what the icon is doing. And the icon is supposed to be SVG paths because SVG is king. And SVG help you to be able to scale in size. And in the SVG file of the icon, you have two things. View box, which is where the icon will be rendered in respect to the size of the view box, and the path, where the browser will take the path and start to draw the icon inside the view box. So for that, for icon, we modify a little bit to accept also the name of the icons from the icon library and also the path of the SVG. and the view box, and the size, and the color. Now, similarly, if we want to override the colors, we also allow text, that's decimal value of the box, and size. We also do the same approach. What happens, you may ask, if the icon have more than one path? That's possible. Well, for that, we're using an array. So basically, you can pass a name to the icon, which the component will know that it's come from these SF icons, from the Storefront UI icons, or you can pass a single path or multiple path as an array, and it will just work. What about functionalities customization? Unfortunately, we haven't found a way to fully support this. For example, here a radio button, and in material design, they implement it with the button separately, the input field separately, and the label separately. So it's very hard to override, to add another on-click event on the label only and on the button only. If you add the event, it has to be on the whole component itself. Okay, the next topic is how you convince user, how you make user happy within 5 minutes, even less. You don't have that 5 minutes. The user nowadays have so many component library that if you don't provide, don't make user feel at ease and happy, they will not use it. So for Storefront UI, we ship it. How do we deliver? Yep, we ship it. Well, in general, we use the shipping bundle code, which is the classic way where we install the plugin and the install function with a very long way. Every time we add a new component, we need to add this file also. The problem with this is that it includes the whole library in productions bundle, with costly, and we don't have any control over the bundle code or whatsoever. So instead, we decided to change the raw source code, which means user import what they want to use. And of course, they can also install the component they want to use, the component in the global scope. And the downside of it is that it doesn't work at the CDN because we don't bundle the whole library. And it needs Webpack or any bundle management tool to compile before using in order to use also. Well, the good news is that we trade off with full control on the bundle code, full tree shaking, everything including the web applications. There's no extra piece that you don't want in there. And nowadays, most of applications are developed with some sort of bundle view management tool like Webpack or like Vite and so on. So the next aspect is how we organize code, because we want to attract also contributors. So we organize code in a very straightforward way. Let's say template. We have a standalone blocks. CSS selector. We use BEM, which stand for block element and modifier conventions to make sure the user understand what this class is about. And props. We use clear and concise name, and slot. We use scope slot. Document. Well, there's 3 questions when you do a documentation for component. How good it is, how to use the component, and whether it's able to play in order for users to understand how it works with different props. For that, we're using a storybook, and it works well. But other questions, let's say how to set up, how to contribute, and whether the component library is actually what the user is looking for. This we're using on this question, we answer by using ViewPress to host our documentation. And lastly, on this just infrastructure tool, but the main thing is the content. Writing is only hard. For that, we automate. We don't want to keep going and repeat ourselves in every place in the documentation. So we built one of our team member, Eddie, he built a process to auto-generate it by going through the directory and extract all the markdown and all the CSS variable using regex, and then fill in the placeholder in the templates for the document, for the related document, and then generate it. And that's it. We have the documentation taken care. The last aspect of component library, how to select it, is whether the component library is simple enough. Well, for that, we're using atomic design to make sure the component is broken down into smaller parts and built on top like a pyramid. Atomic design is the design pattern made by Pratt Forst, and it's very common nowadays. So if you're interested in design pattern, feel free to check it out. So basically, it's have atoms with all the miniest component that doesn't rely on any one. And then from there, you build the molecules from these atoms. An organism is just a combination of molecules and atoms together to form, let's say, a page, let's say a twig, and so on, and template. And from this, we build templates in order to render and to make into a proper page for our application. Okay, and before we finish, any other tips? Yeah, some other tips for such as lazy loading, whenever you need to lazy loading. If there's someone else do some solutions better than you or faster than you, how much you will take for solving a problem, let them use them. For example, image handling. In Storefront UI, we have Storefront UI image component, and we have Storefront UI Cloudinary component, where we allow users to use Cloudinary and enjoy the image optimization out of the box provided by Cloudinary, and that works. And lastly, the most important thing is that always think that you as your own component library user, because think developer first, because they are your single and only user that you should care. So, just a bit about Storefront UI. We are the first Vue.js UI component library dedicated for e-commerce. Was initially developed by this Vue Storefront team, and still it's open source and it's have anything you want to have for e-commerce component library. I make a demo a while ago using Vue Storefront UI in Date, which now is Verso. So check it out. And lastly, if you want to support Storefront UI projects, please give it a star or contribute or join our team. We are looking for a lot of contributors, a good core team members, because, well, I don't have a lot of time to participate in the project recently. So I will appreciate that we have a good hand to take care of this amazing project. And thank you for joining my talk, and hope you enjoyed.